I'll welcome them and kind of let that start rolling and get a poll going kind of to start things.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Connections webinar, number 4, Thriving in a Multi-Generational Environment. We're going to go ahead and get started in a few minutes. Let's welcome everyone to the meeting, and we'll get started shortly. As a reminder, feel free to say hi to other participants in the webinar. You can use the chat feature to share your name and class year. And this week, let's give shout outs to our favorite locations on campus. So feel free to use the chat to communicate with each other throughout the session. Again, if you have questions specific to our panelists, you can do that in the Q&A function, and I will monitor that with Sean and get your questions answered as we go. Give everybody a couple of seconds here to get join us. Welcome. While you guys are getting logged in, I'm going to throw a poll up so we can kind of get a handle on who's in the room with us. So let's do that while we're kind of getting started. All right, so thinking about your current work environment, how many generations are in your current workplace? Answers are coming in.
We have
working in a singular generation, so that's good news. We'll give everyone a couple more seconds. Welcome everyone to the Our Connections webinar on multi-generational workforce. Just taking a quick poll to get started to see how our audience is looking today. Looking at the current demographics, I'm going to end the poll so we can get started, but share the results with all of you. Kind of an interesting cross section here. The winner, if you will, is 3 generations in the workplace, although we have folks between 2 and 5 represented. So a nice cross section of alumni joining us today to learn about how to thrive in this environment. Again, please use the chat feature to communicate with other participants today. If you have questions for the panelists, please do so in the chat or the Q&A feature. And I'm going to throw it over to Sean to welcome our panelists.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and welcome certainly to the panelists, but also all of our participants with us today. Special shout out to Sarah Hathaway and Amy Garrettson, who have been leading the charge on this, this new Art Connections webinar series. This is the 4th in the introductory series. We'll be making announcements here about a fall series as well, but great work, and it's clearly something that a lot of our alums and constituents and friends of the institution are finding some good value in. So glad that you're all here. To make sure that we have as much time as possible here today for our 3 panels to be sharing insights and field a lot of your questions. So we're going to jump right in, but before we do, I'm going to ask each panelist to share a little bit about themselves, their experience and relationship with Ripon, and their current role in organization. And so Mike is our most tenured and experienced professional on the panel today. I'll start with you.
So yeah, thank you. Thanks for doing this. I think this is fantastic. I'm trying to decide to find the 2nd or 3rd layer on your generational chart there. I am a 1979 graduate of Ripon, and my wife and I were both biology majors at Ripon. Since that time, we've moved around a little bit. I found my way into the human resources field after about 7 or 8 years post-college, and moved to Kansas City in 1991. In 1998, I started OMNI Human Resource Management. So we're an HR, we're a 17, 18 person HR department for hire. So we work with small, medium firms throughout the region as an HR consulting firm. We have people that do certs, employee relations, payroll, compensation, all the nonsense. And so, yes, fascinating topic, because humans in the workplace is kind of our jazz, and it's a topic that we deal with and coach and counsel people with on a regular basis. So glad to be here and to be a part of this.
Great, thank you, Mike. Brandon, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Brandon Parrott-Sheffer. I'm a 2008 Ripon alum, majored in psychology and history, predominantly a Mockridge major for those who know her. And currently a senior vice president at Edelman Data and Intelligence. So I'm on the research side of one of the world's largest PR agencies, which is a very unique spot to kind of always be looking at the forefront of different trends in the world, different ways people engage with brands or companies or products or categories or healthcare or finances, et cetera. So at the heart of my work is understanding multi-generational differences between different groups, and then also within the organization as a leader, trying to really, you know, pull together how we can continue to navigate, especially being that we are a fairly younger company, not in terms of how long we've been around, but in terms of the age of people working there. It's a pretty big split of leadership tends to be, you know, long and established and has kind of lived in that. And then there's a lot of turnover at more junior levels. So it's a fairly representative. I think we were, I in my head answered 4 generations currently. We just recently were 5 generations. So it's a lot there, but definitely a really good foundation at Ripon, having, you know, thought about interdisciplinary conversations and studies and how that really pertains in the real world. So really excited to talk today about this topic.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. And Sarah Hathaway, good to see you on board today as a panelist outside of your normal role as moderator. Welcome.
Thank you. It's different to sit in this seat instead of the moderator seat. I'm Sarah Hathaway. I am the Director of Career and Professional Development here at Ripon College. If you're not familiar with where that is, it's in Pickard Commons. Right when you walk in those front door, you'll see the space for Career and Professional Development. I've been at Ripon 3.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 15 plus as a co-owner and project manager of a marketing and tech firm. So I am going to probably speak more about what I hear from my students and young alum, but I also probably will weigh in every once in a while, having sat in the employer seat in my past as well. So thank you for having me here in the panelist side instead of the moderator. Not that the moderator's bad, but it's kind of nice to have a different view. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. So just for all our participants, I have a few leading questions that I'd like to put out to the panelists here to get the conversation going. But as Amy mentioned, a reminder, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to be submitting questions that were on your mind ahead of today, or maybe sparked based on the conversation that we have during these introductory comments. And so, Brandon, I think I'd like to start with you, and given some of the conversations we've had on your role on the alumni board, I know both personally and professionally, building dynamic relationships is something that you really value, right? And so I'd like to ask you, how do you build collaborative relationships 4 to 5 different generations inside the workplace?
No, I think it's a great question. And I think at the heart of it is really 2 core fundamental elements that are really easy to say and really hard to live. Trust and empathy. That in order to really establish any foundational relationship of success, it's having trust in that person, knowing who they are, knowing what built that trust, and establishing a long-term trust over time. And then empathy to understand that they approach the world different from you, and that is not wrong. It's just a different perspective. And so for us and in our environment, those 2 cores continue to lead everything we do. I personally strongly believe in flat organizations where everyone has a chance to share their opinion and it's heard and give their feedback, from intern to C-suite. Anyone can say how they feel about things and everyone should listen to that. As it comes to kind of the direct team management, that then plays into making sure you're actively actually listening, understanding the words behind it, and never saying no without thinking about it, and then without thinking about, is there another way? So for us, it's making sure that you have that ability to dissent, to question, to challenge, baked in every moment. And as if you are the person in a more senior role, putting yourself uncomfortably out there to ask the question and listen to the honest answer.
Thanks, Brandon. And Sarah, given some of those kind of core values that Brandon just spoke to, given the relationship that you obviously have with students on campus, Are those some similar things that you're hearing in your conversations with students if they're getting ready to enter the workforce and has this kind of topic on their mind? And if not, what are you hearing from students in the way that they think about relationship building with different generations, which from their perspective, there may be a bit more anxiety that they're fresh in the professional world?
You know, trust is a big one, but definitely empathy. I think especially currently, the last 5-6 months, empathy is a big one that students are looking for when they're looking at the workplace, looking at whether that be an internship, a postgraduate position. And you know, Brandon's point about flat organizations, that really helps build the trust. And that's where I hear from students that have gone out and done experiences or now work in different types of organizations. The ones that they feel are more flat, they do feel a greater sense of trust, that they feel like they have value because their voices are being heard. That's not to say that there is no value to an organization that has a hierarchy. And some students really respond well to that, and some really need that sense of structure. But whenever they feel that sense of being heard, that adds value to the work that they do and gives them a sense of meaning to the work that they're doing as well.
And if I may, like,
go ahead,
one
Brandon.
thing to add on there is again, I think because this concept gets thrown around a lot, and so I love the way you phrase it, is it's making sure they have a chance to be heard. It's not taking everything they say and doing it.
Right.
It's listening and hearing and acknowledging that you've heard and that they had an input.
Absolutely.
Loved it, Sarah.
I think this notion of adding a sense of value to the work is intriguing. And Mike, zoning in a little bit more on this question, what do you think the role of the mission of an organization plays in thinking about the development of multi-generation and interpersonal relationships?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, the trick for good leaders is to get everybody on board supporting a common mission. And when everybody supports a common mission and they're committed to the end game and the team to get it there, then you start to build trust, and those who are not committed, you know, are detrusted. But at the end of the day, regardless of the generations, everybody has a common goal and outcome. And I think that's powerful in getting different generations together, and builds a lot more cohesiveness faster. The trick and the art is leaders who are skilled and cognizant and capable of figuring out how to do that. But I think that's pretty important. Yeah. Thanks,
Mike. I'd like to shift a bit to thinking about some communication practices. And before I do so, I'm going to ask Amy to generate another poll here quickly around what channels and tools our participants find most effective inside their work and inside their communication. So for our panelists, I think you can certainly speak to some of your favorite tools and channels as well. But, you know, I'll go back and start with Brandon here. How has COVID forced communication changes, maybe outside the obvious shifts, right, to more virtual and Zoom meetings? And what impact do you think that has had on you and your multi-generational colleagues?
So first I'll say I did launch the poll. So while we're kind of getting into this topic, feel free to let us know all the ways that you all are communicating in your workplace across the generations. And I'll let this hang out a little bit because you can multi-select. So while Mike and Sarah and Brandon are chatting, we'll look at these results, and I think it'll frame some of the context here, but getting great responses on what's very popular these days. So go ahead, Brandon.
No, it's a great question. I think there's a lot to unpackage in there, and I'll try to be as concise because I know, Mike, you and I have talked about this in the past, and you have a lot of great thoughts as well. That, if anything, I think my biggest thing that I feel like has happened, one, is it's made a world that felt impossible more possible. I feel like when all of this started, everyone was thinking, especially in kind of white collar corporate America, so that's more of my experience is in office settings, like, how are we going to do this? And if anything, it's made I'm in client relations, a national team. Like, it's made everyone feel closer. It's made everyone feel more connected. It also made a world of digitization more possible with video conferencing and IMing and, you know, digital teams, et cetera. So I think that's one. And the second is it's really had to force us to pay attention to the way we communicate, and question whether we're doing things in the right way or not. And I feel like in the decade plus I've been in business, that before now, no one's ever really sat down and said, is this the most effective way to talk?
Yeah, so you'll see there is poll results here. The kind of three that bubble to the top is email, phone, and one-on-one meetings. What are your thoughts about, in this virtual age, the desire for email, phone, and one-on-one, which we used all the time before COVID?
I'm going to pass that to Mike. I know he has some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, I'll tell you this quick story. So we're a third-party HR department. We have a motto here: we're a relationship company first and an expert company second. Because truth of the matter, most people don't like their HR department. And we have to be so good. We get paid to do this. So last year I had a millennial at her desk, and her job is to take care of employees, and she's in tears. And I go, why are you in tears? I can't try hard enough, and I can't ever be successful. I get these horrible emails from this older next generation woman, and they're so curt and they're so mean. I can't please anybody. And she literally was in tears at her desk. I go, honey, what did you pick up the phone and call? No. Well, does she really have the anger in her heart that you perceive in her email? And that is a very common occurrence. And so I go out of my way to try to be advancing, pick up the phone, go to the client, talk to these people, because the inconsistency of channels and the misinterpretation, unfortunately, of digital channels, as we talked in our little pre-session, is a significant barrier to building relationships, especially within multiple generations. And I think that story is probably something you all have lived and seen. How many of you have ever gotten the wrong emotional impression because of a digital communication you received? And I think that keeping that in mind, especially when it deals with multiple generations, is critical. So anyway.
And Sarah, if I can, sorry, Sarah, I want to pick off there, but if I can just add on to that, I think just two things really quick that I think are really, really good takeaways for people that we always talk about. And Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head there of, there are two roles in communication, listener and talker. And as the talker, you have to be familiar with the way that your tone is coming off. And I think that is something that, you know, I've had to, I have a very strong voice. Amy and Sean can very much attest to. I speak my mind. I speak very plainly. I am very direct, which is very dismissive for a lot of people, and it's very aggressive for a lot of people. And I've had to be very mindful of the people I'm talking to, of what that comes in. That's you as the speaker. As you as the listener, the one that we always challenge, especially our junior team on, is assume positive intent. Exactly what you're saying, Mike, is like, most people do not go through the day trying to be mean. So if you read an email from them that comes across mean, that's probably not what they intended.
That's right. It's amazing. Amazing.
Speaking of strong voices, I'm looking at the participant list, and I know we have some in that group too. So as Amy mentioned, please submit your questions and thoughts into the Q&A. We're going to wrap up here in just a few minutes with some of these questions. But Sarah, I want to come back to the specific question around communication channels. What's your reaction to what Mike and Brandon just talked about in their respective worlds, given your frequent communication and interaction with students here on campus, and then students that come through your world in career and professional development and come back and talk to you about some of those experiences they're having in year one, year two, based on whatever occupation they landed?
You know, first I want to respond to the poll. I'm really sad that Slack came in so low. I'm a big Slack fan, so darn. But that one
Sarah, what is Slack for those?
Slack is it's a communication / project management tool that a lot of companies use in place of flooding inboxes with email. You can respond to something in Slack that's based on a project only that you're working on instead of having to respond and put it in somebody's inbox. So it's a great tool for organizing communication and tasks as well. So that's Slack. I get no endorsement dollars off of my fandom of Slack at all. But you know, when you talk about multiple generations in the workplace, the one thing that I think, you know, when you're dealing with multiple ways of communicating, your email, your one-to-one, your Zoom, it's really understanding where that audience is at that point when you're trying to communicate with them. If it's a younger generation that you are primarily working with, it's really understanding what is the best way to communicate with them and how do they receive the information the best. You know, the point about the email, yes, it's so easy to read between the lines and assume the worst before you assume the best. But also some of our younger generations are really not email users, right? So how do you get to where they're at? Is it phone calls? Usually not. They're also not real big phone call people. And I think this is what's leveled some of the workplace generational issues is the Zoom that we've all, or the Teams, or the different video platforms. It's really leveled the playing field, I think, across generations. And it's one that your younger generations, I think, really feel like that's their comfort zone because that's something that they're used to. That's not just how they've done a lot of learning, but that's how they've done a lot of socializing and communicating with peers. So to transition to our work world being so Zoom or web-based, video-based is something that I think has really leveled it across generations. It's maybe made it harder for some people to feel that they're being heard, especially if you're a one-to-one face-to-face industry. But I do think the biggest challenge for any organization is to understand it's not one way of communicating, it's multiple ways, especially when you're dealing with multiple generations. You can't just communicate one way, hope everybody gets that message. You have to communicate in multiple ways, but yet ride that fine line of not over communicating.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I'd like to, I'm going to move into some questions that were submitted ahead of the webinar today. The first one comes in from Chip Retson, class of 69. I see Chip has been able to join us here today. Welcome, Chip. Chip's question was, workplaces include, and in Chip's case as well, volunteer organizations like SCORE and public education partners. Please discuss if there are any differences between multi-generations in a for-profit organization versus a nonprofit organization, which I think is a really unique and interesting question and a pertinent one given the panelists that we have here, that we have a blend of both based on occupation and outside volunteer and board service. And so, Mike, let's start with you. What's your reaction to that question from Chip about potential issues that might arise in a for-profit org versus a nonprofit org?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, half the perspective I have, half our clients are nonprofit, half are for-profit. That's just a thing for me that we do. And I think that from the people side, the most fascinating thing about nonprofits is they tend to attract people of passion and empathy. I often describe and oversimplify. In this world, there are thinkers, and in this world, there are feelers. Now, you think about that a minute. Who works in nonprofit? Who works in nursing? Who works in the caring professions? Feelers. And feelers have a higher empathy, relational orientation to the way they engage and communicate. I'm looking at Brandon. A little bit of a thinker there. And so I find it very interesting when it comes to relationship, conflict management, communication, that there is a difference. And when I think of the client groups, it's what makes my profession fascinating in that sector is the the degree of emotional engagement that's usually part of what's going on that doesn't happen in firms that are a little more all business and not necessarily filled with people with passion. So it is different. I'm over exaggerating to make a point, but it does help to have a certain degree of emotional intelligence about the culture and the people and the nature of folk within the organization and how to communicate best. So it's fascinating. Good question.
If I can chime in there, because Chip, I see some additional content there also from your Q&A and wanting to seek, especially younger, more tech savvy people to an organization, and I hear that a lot in terms of recruitment. I think what's really interesting in this as well, I love that description, Mike, because at the heart of it is a motivation and an intrinsic value. One is, when you are recruiting these people, when you are recruiting anyone for a position, there's something you're looking for and there's something they're looking for. And in short, what I would strongly recommend everyone, especially if you are recruiting younger people, specifically for their tech and digital savviness, to potentially understand that especially the Gen Z world right now is not as tech motivated as you would assume they are. They're tech native, they understand it, they engage with it, but it is not often their priority or their preferred way of living. In fact, we're seeing a counterbalance to more analog technology, more in-person, more outdoors, more hands in the earth. So what you might be looking for might be different from them. As Mike mentioned, there's a degree of EQ. I remember being the huge thing, emotional and intelligence there we used to be the big term. If you feel like you're very comfortable with that, you're probably already diagnosing people on what they're interested in. Psych major here, I admit I do it all the time. I can't not do it. I can't not analyze people when I talk to them. I'm in market research as well, like it's my life. If you're not, there's no shame in asking that person, what are you looking for? What is your hope here? And really listen to the answers there, because you might have to sell them on something else other than exactly what you're looking for. And we do that all the time in nonprofit and profit communication. So we have clients in both. The heart of the question is really getting at what that person's looking for so that I can translate that to them. I would say in the difference there, it's probably becoming more blurred because for-profit institutions are becoming much more ESG and corporate social responsibility focused. So they're becoming more purpose-led. And nonprofits are having to have some really hard conversations about financials and performance as well to keep themselves going in through the economic recession. So they're learning and borrowing from each other. That line is going to become a lot more hazy.
Thanks, Brandon. There was a follow-up question that came in from Tom Abendroth on the Q&A, specifically in response to Mike's commentary about phone versus email. And the question from Tom is, should firms be providing affirmative training on phone skills? And I'm gonna start with Mike. I want to hit Sarah after this, after Mike's response. And Tom's assessment is the potential that younger employees may not have the same skill set in that area, specifically thinking about phone skills, because it used to just be developed through repetition, which may not be there right now. So how would you respond to that, Mike?
Oh, that's interesting. Phone skills. If I interpret that right, I would just say that in a phone, it's a much more personal channel of communication, and a little bit to what Brandon said earlier. Communication is two parts. It's to get information. I always say it's to get information back and forth, but it's also an opportunity to create relationship. And so if you're using telephone, it is a much more personal channel of communication that affords you the opportunity to build relationship. And there's just not enough keystrokes and there's just not enough opportunity to do that in email. The phone skill, therefore, I would encourage, and if I've interpreted Tom right, good to hear from you, Tom, is that that would be the opportunity to ensure that training is to be confident about building the relationship part that goes along with the rare chance to talk to somebody versus just sharing information, which is typically the outcome of an email, if that makes any sense.
Sarah, the students you're working with and talking, what's their view on use of phone in their interactions?
A great thing to kind of give you a sense of what I hear from students in regard to phone is I probably get more questions on how to prepare and conduct themselves in a phone interview than I do from a face-to-face or a video interview. It is, it's something that I hear from students often is the part after the fact, the part of the interview process that they didn't like, that they felt the most uncomfortable with. And I think it really is because of the way communication styles and the delivery of communication has changed over generations. You know, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm not even a big fan of the phone, but certainly not to the extent that, you know, millennials and Gen Z have really, I don't want to say don't like the phone, but it's just not the method that they feel is the most compelling to communicate through. You know, and to Tom's question, you know, is it training? Maybe it's not training as much as making the audience understand the value of the telephone conversation and giving them some meaning behind why it's still important in the business that they're working in or the role that they have. Sometimes if you can say, this is really why it works, and let me give you an example of why, that provides them a better context than I'm going to train you how to be good on the phone. So it's going to be tough to get somebody comfortable using the phone that's not their comfort zone. But at the same time, if it's critical to the work that you do or the company deliverables, then, you know, it's something that has to be addressed, but it's not going to be the quickest training or turnaround.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to move to another pre-submitted question that came in from George Boothby, class of 74. Good to hear from you, George. So based on the panelists' experience, one of the following 4 key challenges to operating a multi-generational business is the most difficult to address and resolve. And we've talked around the edges of some of these, so it's pertinent. Number 1, cultural expectation. The second one, negative stereotypes, which we haven't really dove into much here today. 3, communication style, and 4, company culture. So Brandon, I'm going to ask you to first up speak to that question, and after you pick one, maybe speak to how you address that at Edelman.
Sean, you know for a fact I'm not going to pick one. I'm going to talk around
I'm
this.
trying to.
I'm going to try to be concise in this. It's a great question, and it's a great question because it is so complicated, and they all winnow to each other. Which is the most difficult to address and resolve, in my opinion, is company culture. Company culture is a very hard thing to change because it is both a promise and a reality that you have to live and breathe every single day, repetitively, until people give you credit for changing it. So if you have a toxic or inhospitable company culture that is creating problems across generations, that is going to be the hardest thing because you have to get to the systemic root of where that comes from. The easiest and most important to change, in my opinion, of that is communication style, because that is the direct relationship with the manager that everyone has probably heard. Your relationship with your manager is the most important relationship you have at work. And that is where people don't quit companies, they don't quit jobs, they quit managers. And that continues to be very, very true. The negative stereotype, just to throw out there, and again, at the underlying of all of this, is there is a change that is happening as millennials and Gen Z are more aligned than Gen X and boomers on one very core thing here that goes to communication style and company culture, which is the role of authority. Gen X and boomers are generally raised to respect authority and to listen to authority and to revere authority. Whereas millennials and Gen Z are taught to question authority, to challenge authority, to understand why that authority exists before accepting it. And that change is seismic in the workplace, because no longer can somebody say, do this because I said so, or you're going to start losing staff. And that's where, again, that goes to what you stand for and who you are as a company, how those relationships manifest in communication, and then what is the background and cultural expectation of the organization. So no,
that was good. That was good.
Very
Appreciate it. Sarah, reactions to Brandon's assessment and your own insights, please.
You know, it's interesting you talked about company culture first. You know, because a lot of what I'm reading and getting out of webinars right now is company culture is something that's really being questioned across the board from its, are you asking your employees to change who they are in order to fit into your company culture? And there's a real resistance to that, and it's been growing. I know that in some of the major employers nationally that do a lot of hiring that talked culture 3 to 5 years ago, they're not using that word anymore. They're not talking about company culture. They're talking about meaningful work, or they're talking about, cause-driven work. Back to your point earlier, Brandon, about, how do you be cause-driven or mission-driven, yet at the same time meet the deliverables? And that's a balancing act, but it's become more and more important to millennials and Gen Z that there be some meaning or cause behind the work that they're doing. So it's interesting. Culture was the first one because that is the one I hear the most feedback from students when they're exploring or researching companies is, yeah, I don't like their culture. I don't feel like I'd fit in, and I'm not going to change who I am to fit into that. And then with this question, the one that I highlighted was the biggest challenge, but I think to your point, Brandon, the one that has the most ability for change and adaptation is communication style. As long as you could approach it with it's not one way, or you don't hear the message, it has to be approached multiple ways. And then negative stereotypes, there's always going to be negative stereotypes. There's also going to be, generational stereotypes. I think one of the ways that I've heard students or young alumni who've come back to talk to me talk about ways that they don't hear about the stereotyping of generations in the workplace is by really doing cross-collaborative work where it's not mentorship from the top down or from the seasoned employee down. It's cross-mentoring. It's young employees mentoring those that are higher up on the hierarchy, as well as from the top down as well. And then cultural expectation really kind of fits in with company culture. What are those expectations, and are they realistic to that generation that you're looking to hire and onboard into your workplace?
Mike, your reaction to George's question?
That's a great question. So the short story, as I saw this, number 4 is a consequence of how well an organization manages number 1, 2, and 3. Secondly, I would say that, so yesterday I was talking to a VP of HR for one of our larger nonprofit healthcare clients, and they got a new CEO in the last 6 months. And he's walking the halls and he's looking at his HR person going, how the hell did all these people get hired? They don't care. They're an urban healthcare organization, and these staff don't care. We don't have a caring culture. So, you go into the speak of, well, what do you do? Assessments? Do you have a common culture? At the end of the day, what's your cultural expectation? And be clear and align people to the mission of the organization. Secondly, negative stereotype, at some level, you either coach it or remove it, because if it's a deterrent to building an effective team, fix it. The third is communication style, and the truth of the matter is, do you have a business that's feeler-oriented or thinker-oriented? Because if I have a caring organization in healthcare, I have people that need to feel belonging. You got to talk to me. You got to get to care about me. And if all we do is have a communication style that's digital, that ain't going to happen. So how well you manage the number 1, 2, and 3 really is the core of building whatever number 4 is going to look like. And great leaders have to figure out the answer to the first 3 and manage it accordingly. You'll have an amazing culture if you do those first 3 things right.
Great question, great responses. Thank you all. I'm going to do one more final question here to try to summarize our time here today, and then Amy will wrap us up with some concluding comments, given that we have about 5 minutes left. Brandon's not going to like me limiting this to one actionable item, but let's try to provide one actionable takeaway that our participants can leave with in a assessing the way that they maneuver multi-generational relationships. And Sarah, let's start with you, please.
There's two. I have two. I'm sorry, Sean, but I'm going to do and a don't. If your organization has any type of generation-based affinity groups, eliminate them. They help reinforce stereotypes, so do away with those. But more importantly, survey and conduct monitoring of what is the incentives and the motivations of those different generations in your workplace, instead of taking the approach of, okay, this is what they're all wanting out of this work, so we deliver that one thing to them. So really pay attention to where they're at and incentivize and motivate the way you deal with the different generations of your workplace that approaches where they're at in their life currently.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Mike.
One thing, so it's kind of a coaching thing that I often, go to lunch, go to coffee. Period. Get out of the workplace. Human to human. I don't care how old you are, what planet you're from, go to lunch, because it dispels the traditional hierarchical thing that happens in the workplace. Don't have reviews behind a desk. Don't go out and know people as people. And when people take the time to go have coffee, go to lunch, you start to break down some of the things that the workplace doesn't usually let you break down. It more quickly will allow you to build trust, empathy, and rapport of things in common. And the faster the organization helps people build trust and relationships, the faster these differences start to melt away. Go to coffee, go to lunch.
Good stuff. Thank you, Mike. And Brandon.
One, I got you.
All right.
Process the things that are said to you instead of reacting, which is another way of saying check your bias. And I'm not saying check your bias of age and stereotypes you have. As Mike said, everyone has a feeling or thinking propensity. Everyone has efficiency versus talking things around. You have a natural way in which you view the world that is yours and yours alone, and it is not right or wrong. It is just your way of processing, and others will have a different perspective. We have had Gen Z come to us and complain that our work environment is not the type of place they can make friends. And my first reaction, my bias was, it's not my problem to make friends for you. But maybe that is what is going to get them motivated in their work. And maybe I do have to do a better job of connecting, because that is where they view the world. The other one I'll say is I have had more people come into my office and cry as a senior vice president at a PR agency than I did as a hall director at a really crappy university down the road in Appleton from Ripon. Legitimately, just regularly. And I would never have thought, as Mike said, as a thinking person, like thinking being that is my preference of being more rational and less emotional, that somebody would cry at work to somebody, like to their boss, basically. But I had to check that moment and say, this is what this person needs in order to stay here, to feel motivated and continue on. And every single time I've seen a drastic increased productivity, increased work output, more dedication, more hand raising. It's necessary to challenge the way you view the world.
Thanks, Brandon. And Amy, I know you're going to wrap us up, but let me say, I am thrilled that we squeezed in posturing Ripon over Lawrence here a little bit today. So thank you for that.
Knew we could count on you guys. That's perfect. Again, thank you guys so much for chatting with everyone about multi-generational workplaces. We can make it a little easier to say and kind of offering some of those insights. I know it's an interesting topic normally, and then you throw COVID and virtual communications on top of it. It's a plethora of places to start and go, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. We'll look forward to how we can continue to engage each other in these conversations, and also our students as they continue to learn and grow as well. Stay tuned after the webinar. I will send out a short survey as a follow-up, and we appreciate your feedback as we look to, again, roll out the next phase of our series for the fall. And if you need, have any specific things you'd like to talk further with Mike or Brandon or Sarah, definitely, we'd love to put you guys in touch for that as well. So again, thank you so much for participating in our final summer Our Connections webinar series, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
Take care.
Yeah, very good. Thanks.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you, guys.